Welcome back, guys. This is JE Live. I am JE, Jake Allenbogen. And joining me is my guy, Preacher Boy Roy. You can go find him on Twitter. That is Roy Countryman. I met this guy in Mobile, Alabama, and man, he knows just so much about football. And for you Rams fans out there that saw that video on Van Jefferson, he's the guy saying, oh, there's Van Jefferson again at the beginning on that Senior Bowl clip. So welcome to the show, Roy. Happy to have you.
Hey, thanks, Jake, for inviting me on here. I know you got the big Ram following, so hopefully I can bring you some Steeler followers out there to the West Coast, and we can get you some more, some of that brotherly love here from PA. But we don't like Eagles, but we'll just go with PA love, maybe. Yeah, we had some good times out the Senior Bowl here. Van Jefferson, that wasn't just one day. We kept saying that. I know you said it multiple times when we were there during the Senior Bowl practices, and some big things in store. I don't know if you've talked a lot about it or not, but this guy, I always mess it up this way, is actually in a publication that's going to be coming out here soon on the PDF version, which will break a little news. It's only PDF, no print, but Prospect Encyclopedia featuring Mr. Ellenbogen over there doing the Rams, and he's going to be doing your write-ups for Van Jefferson and all the younger guys. So big things in store for him over there.
Hey, man, I'm honored, that you reached out to me in regards to that. Happy to do it. I obviously love the Rams. I know a thing or two about their team. So it was, obviously something that I wanted to do. And it's been a lot of fun. I've been enjoying it. And I cannot wait to see the final product, especially everything, that everyone has put in, all the hard work that everyone's doing. Just can't wait to, I'll be reading it all from front to back. So, so let's get into it. For the Rams followers out there, I did a video earlier today, or I recorded last night, but I dropped it today. And the guy by the name of Michael Lombardi, who has been in the news for many different things, the time where he said Doug Peterson was the least qualified coach to be at least qualified to be an NFL coach, and then he ended up winning a Super Bowl. And then Jason Kelsey has the famous, the clown comment or whatever. He called him a clown. So yeah, he basically comes out on a podcast and he says the Rams were trying to trade Robert Woods for a 3rd round pick in hopes to free the space, and not just cap space, but just like actual space for Julio Jones. I already kind of gave my thoughts on that, and we can talk more in depth, but I'm really curious to get your thoughts on this, whether you think, 1, it's legit, and 2, what do you think about the Rams even doing that?
Okay, so first of all, I'd have to say legitimacy, maybe 50-50. I mean, there's a lot of phone calls that are placed, but a lot of times, I don't know if you've ever seen the calls John Dorsey makes to Chris Ballard out there in Indianapolis. They just mess with people. So yeah. I'm thinking that might have been this phone call that Lombardi jumped on as one of them, just fake news type calls, just to kind of bug with them. But in the grand scheme of things, to me, I don't see, as dominant as Julio Jones was in his prime when he first came in. We all know that he's on his back 9 of his career. Not saying he can't have a back 9 as long as Larry Fitzgerald, but he's had the soft tissue injuries and the small injuries that are mounting up here. We know he has issues with that ankle where it's basically, there isn't a lot of meat left in there. He has a lot of screws and whatnot. So the long-term durability question for me, I would personally rather have Robert Woods in the McVay offense. So I get where it seems like any big free agent to be or any big name on the trade market is always connected to Los Angeles, just because of Snead's ability to kind of come out of left field and, make the salary cap a myth and trade. I think he don't have a 1st round pick to 2039 or something like that. But hey, he's literally the here and now. He wants to play in this year, and I get it, but I don't understand that it would be that much of a difference in production wise. I would rather personally have the combination of, Kupp, Woods, and Van Jefferson with a dash of Deshaun Jackson, who's had his injury questions as well, than I would parlaying Woods out for draft capital and Julio Jones. I just don't think the grand scheme of the production would be that much skewed for the difference that you're getting, unless you're talking about them really wanting to get that 3rd round pick just for more draft capital next year with the dearth of the amount of draft prospects that are going to be coming in. But I just don't see spending that extra money just to better yourself by this much. It just doesn't make no sense, from a team building perspective. And we all know that Matt Stafford, likes to distribute the ball the whole way around. I mean, like when he had Calvin Johnson, he liked peppering Calvin Johnson, but that was literally his only target back then. But he's had Marvin Jones, he's had Kenny Galladay, TJ Hawkinson. He likes distributing, for everybody. And I feel, coming from a perspective of a guy that had to live through the Steelers and the Killer Bees with Bell and Brown, that was almost a detriment sometimes to the quarterback having to force feed a mouth targets. And honestly, I think Stafford is better off, going through his progressions, hitting his guy in strides, not having to worry about, well, Julio ain't getting his cut. I don't want him to get upset. Not saying he has that type of personality, but I wouldn't do it. And I believe Woods is a couple years younger, 3 years younger, if I'm not mistaken, than
You're right.
Julio. So I just would rather have that youth. He's been a lot healthier throughout his career, and I'm not trying to discount what the production has been for Julio Jones. Take that with a grain of salt, but the total is better than just the one in this topic.
Yeah, and I kind of look at it as it's just greed. It's just straight up greed, and that's why I can't rule it out that the Rams did something like that. I don't believe they did, but I can't rule it out because in the past, you could argue they got a little greedy, Marcus Peters, Jalen Ramsey, but at the same time, Ramsey was a huge upgrade over Peters because Peters was a guy who's an all or nothing corner and would really go for, he'd go for the big play and it would really hurt the Rams over the top. I mean, look at, the game against the Saints, the first game of that year. When you look at, Michael Thomas going over the top and it's just like, there's nothing you can do. There's no safety help or anything like that. They can actually count on Jalen Ramsey to shut any receiver down. I think he's the best in football, playing the cornerback position. But for this, to me, I keep saying, when Julio Jones first came up as a Rams target, when it was even linked, I said over and over again, I'm like, I wouldn't do this trade. I wouldn't do this trade if it was just sending picks and keeping him with Robert Woods, because here's the thing. I don't want to stunt Van Jefferson's growth. You can do that 1 year. That's the mulligan. But when you start getting into a second round wide receiver, you're like, we might use him in year 2. Now, all of a sudden, that's going to kill his confidence. This is somebody that, I graded really high in our guide, route running, because this is one of the best route runners to come out of college, I think, in the last 5 years. And the reason for that is because his father, Sean Jefferson, was an NFL receiver. He's had that around. The bloodline's been huge, but you talk about like the way he runs his routes, he's got controlled aggression. Like he's a violent route runner, but he's always like, I guess he's always in control. I think that's the best way to put it. And so, to me, I think that's somebody, if he even gets 600 yards this year, I still think he'll come down with 10 or 11 touchdowns from Stafford. That's kind of where I see him. It's a really hard offense to have gigantic stats in, because I think, obviously you look at Woods, Kupp, Deshaun, I think he's going to be fourth, in my opinion. You have Van, you have Higbee, the emergence potentially of Jacob Harris, you have Bryson Hopkins. Akers is going to be used more in the backfield. And I actually think Henderson's going to be used in a role very similar to James White. And if that's the case, there's not a ton of mouths. There's a lot of mouths to feed. There's not a ton of, passes to feed them.
There's only one ball.
Yeah. So I think people will get, kind of like, oh, we should have made this trade if they're like stat hungry and they look at Van Jefferson's stats. I know I did that projection video and people are like, you only have 600 yards and you're telling me this guy's gonna have a great year. I'm like, think about this though, 600 yards in that offense is like 1,200 yards in an offense where it's just him. So, that's kind of how I'm looking at that. But I said all along I wouldn't have done that trade because it's greedy. That's one of the best positions that you have, depth filled. I mean, you didn't even mention earlier because I mean they have so many receivers. Tutu Atwell, a second round pick that they probably didn't need to go out and get, but they got him. And then Ben Skoronek, who I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Skoronek.
I had to start with that. Ben Skoronek, and I'm still probably gonna forget that, so bear with me here. But like we've talked about it, I mean they're really high on him. You know, this is somebody I think that could emerge as a starter down the line. So I look at the receiver group and I'm like, no. However, there's one position in, particular that I look at and I'm like, okay, if a guy like Khalil Mack became available, I'd be all after that, because here's the thing. If you made Aaron Donald's life easier, well, look, Aaron Donald's life isn't that easy, in my opinion. Yeah. And look at what he's doing. So imagine you add Khalil Mack, you have Leonard Floyd, you have Ashawn Robinson, you have Sebastian Joseph Day, you have Bobby Brown III. All of a sudden, Aaron Donald's life gets a little easier. And if we're talking about like the difference is that he's being double teamed 50% of the time instead of 70 to 80, I'll take it. But Khalil Mack being there and the way Leonard Floyd played, that might be down to 40, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't know how you double team Aaron Donald and leave Khalil Mack one-on-one. Just like I don't know how you double team Khalil Mack and leave Aaron Donald one-on-one. Right. So it would be, you'd have to really pick your poison there. And so I know they tried to go out and get him before he went to the Bears. That is the only guy to me, like that's the only position to me. If the Rams really felt like, they needed to go out and get a star, to me, that's going to actually better your team. And like you said, it'd be marginally better if they got Julio Jones. But like, I think the point of getting Julio Jones is to add that Calvin Johnson type threat over the top. But on top of that, I think it's to go with Woods and Kupp. So that's why that whole idea that they were trying to move him, I almost don't understand that in the slightest.
Well, it goes back, like, I'll go back to what you were talking about with Van Jefferson. You invested that high of a pick in him, and you hit the nail on the head. His route running is some of the best. And one of the most underrated things, like whenever I'm scouting a player from the college to the NFL level that I look for is balance throughout your route running. He is one of the most balanced route runners. And you can definitely tell when you're going in and out of your routes, his hips were able to stay square and not be able to have to over adjust whenever he's cutting in and out. So that small type of subtleties goes 1,000 times with separation when it comes to the NFL level. You could be a quick guy, but it's them small subtleties in and out. So Van Jefferson is really, in my opinion, he might, like you said, only have 600 yards, but he's going to be a red zone threat with that ability to separate in small spaces. And Deshaun Jackson might be getting more play, between the 20s because of his ability to lift the coverage for a Kupp and the Woods on the intermediate routes. But he's not going to have the same type of impact in the red zone as a Van Jefferson will. So, and as far as Julio Jones go, and you're talking about Khalil Mack, that would definitely be the one move that I would do if I was a GM. Any type of pass rusher that would be coming up, even, that would be a close fit. If you could have a bookend with Floyd right now, and as you said, Donald's already a dominant presence as he is, probably he is the most dominant. Him and TJ Watt have been neck and neck the last 2 years with pressure production and sack production and just game-changing plays. And you can see Watt's doing it from the outside. Donald's on the inside. If you could get a guy like that that's maybe on his last year of his contract, I would definitely be parlaying a draft pick for that rather than a 32-year-old Julio Jones. Yeah. And like you said, it's trying to – I get what people are saying. They're connecting dots. Ryan had Johnson, bigger type receiver. Think automatically he needs that bigger type receiver. No. Try to project Stafford into the McVay offense, not the offenses he ran in Detroit. The McVay offense is more, quick, get it out, intermediate types, win after the catch. You don't need that similar body type. They already have a player like that, like you said, in Skoronek. He can win the deep routes as a vertical-based receiver, even though he doesn't have the speed of a Julio Jones. He has that strength factor, almost the oversized receiver, light tight end, flex type that's going to be utilized, because that's really where I see him at this level, is he's going to be a big slot guy or a tight end. Maybe he grows into that role, but they already have that vertical presence in their offense, whether it's speed with Jackson, more of a power-based system, which Jefferson can also play because he can play above the rim with his strong hands. We talked about down at the Senior Bowl. He was able to make catches in combat situations look easy. And that's really going to be where you're going to make your money. I just don't see, gluttony with the receivers whenever you have I don't want to say a glaring need, because you just have a lot of under the radar type players. Justin Hollins played well after coming from Denver over to the Rams. Then you also had Terrell Lewis, who's kind of is he smoke and mirrors? Is he the guy from Alabama that was a dominant pass rusher, or is he the guy from Alabama that was on the injured list a lot of times? So you don't know, is he in the training room or is he sitting in a Pro Bowl in a few months? But he has that type of upside that he could be a Pro Bowler. So maybe it's him that's going to be taking that next step due to the abilities of Floyd on the other side and Donald taking on them double teams. But I would not be putting the money and the draft capital, and I completely agree with you. I would not even have done this move, even if it was just draft capital going back, because you basically signed Deshaun Jackson for naught. And why would you have ever drafted Tutu Atwell? Like you said, it was basically a luxury pick. Excuse me. But McVay, I get it. When you are that type of coach that has that type of background in developing receivers, and that's where you really have had your forte, you're always going to be on the prowl for a guy like, I can pepper this guy in maybe on, jet sweeps, and maybe I can have him as a standout kick returner early. And then that's your long-term replacement for the Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson is your 1-year guy, but Tutu Atwell 2 years from now is going to be Deshaun Jackson part 2. So when you're building a roster like that, I would rather have an 8-headed monster with varying skill sets than a one Julio Jones and just underdeveloped pass rushers. Go out and get a pass rushing piece. Go spend that draft capital in there. Like what in my theory, when you're building a team, I'm actually I've been trying to do some studying here throughout doing the prospect encyclopedia. Is one thing that really opened my eyes to this was the value of running backs have been devalued. Are wide receivers now being devalued to the point where you're seeing such an explosion of spread offenses in college game that now in the last 3 to 4 years, we've had so many receivers taken, and so many of them have been put up, I don't want to say modest production, but good to great production in year 1 and year 2 of their contract. Why would you spend 16 plus million on a receiver when I can go out and take a guy in maybe the 3rd and 5th round to replace that production? Even though it's on a rookie contract and it's 2 players taking up the 1, I can match up better onto the defensive side like a chess match than paying the one Julio Jones that maybe in the 2nd year of his contract blows out his knee, injures his ankle again. And I'm stuck on the hook for that 16 plus million, where I could go back and take those 2 receivers in the draft and peddle that 16 plus million for an edge rusher to complement your Aaron Donald. So for me, I've been kind of going back to my, syllabus of how would I attack a building a team, and I've been kind of bumping receiver down just ever so slightly. It's not saying like if you're in a Super Bowl window that you don't go out and get a guy if you really like him, but I think I would be kind of discounting my receivers here a little bit with the way the development has been at the college level to the NFL the last few years.
No, I get that. And, it's kind of funny because it adds on to what I've been saying is that you don't need to get your Julio Jones. You already did that when you got Matthew Stafford. He's the big splash. If you look around the league, teams panicked because everyone had the internal conversation, whether they want to admit or not. Everyone except for the Chiefs. Everyone except for the Chiefs had the internal conversation. Do we go out and get Deshaun Watson before all this stuff went down? Like, for real, because you have to have that conversation. Is he worth it? Is our guy going to take us to the next level? Personally, before everything went down, if I was the Browns, I don't know who's beating the Browns if they get Deshaun Watson, so I would have done that. But glad they didn't, because, who knows what happens with
I'll be the first one to admit, whenever I heard, Ben's maybe retiring, and I heard Deshaun Watson available, I'm like, let's pull the Les Snead. Let's trade the next 4 first-round picks to bring him to Pittsburgh, because you put him in Pittsburgh, oh my goodness. Him and Claypool and Deontay Johnson, and that offense would be sick with a new offensive coordinator. Yeah. It's very spread oriented and likes matchups with run after the catch. That's a deadly. I would still be up for that next year if everything, not saying off the field issues with Watson are good or are good whatsoever, but just on the field, Watson to Pittsburgh, any team is exciting. But yeah,
and I think really that internal conversation, in every organization except for the Chiefs started, and I'd argue Baltimore would also be a team that wouldn't be in that, because I think they're really sold on Lamar.
Yeah.
But I just feel like you had the 49ers, you had the Colts, you had, the Lions potentially, because they had Stafford, you had Carolina,
definitely.
Seattle. I mean, they didn't know what was going on with Russell Wilson.
Right.
Dallas potentially with Dak. And then I think the Raiders, not knowing, because I think Carr is a good quarterback, but is Carr going to win you a Super Bowl? I think that arm is really holding them back. And I think it's really holding back a guy that they drafted in the first round, in Henry Ruggs III, which is really odd, because that's like the only way they wanted to use him last year, which was just such a disservice to his, ability.
The thing with Derek Carr, Jake, is it kind of goes back to, I always go back to AFC North football. It's just my way of thinking. So is he Andy Dalton? Like the Cincinnati Bengals for 10 years were playoff contenders. They were always consistently in there to win the division, to maybe sneak into that first, second round of the playoffs. But he's never been that good, and he never will be that good. It's not, I'm not trying to knock on Andy Dalton too much. He's a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. But he's not that good of a quarterback. It's going to be the reason you win the Super Bowl. He's going to be an accessory piece to it. It's because you had the AJ Greens and you had the running games. And for me, I just never see, like, is Derek Carr that guy? Like, because Derek Carr can get me to the playoffs, but I'm always going to be like first or second round exit. He's never going to be the guy that gets me there. So if I'm that in that aspect and I'm John Gruden, I would have shipped him out long ago. Like if I'm with a guy for more than 5+ years, as good as he's been for me, if I can look myself in the mirror and say, I'm not going to win a Super Bowl with this guy, I would rather take a swing for the fences.
I hear you. Well, it's funny because I don't view Derek Carr in that way. I think he's a step. I really don't like Andy Dalton. I'm very, very like, everyone knows I'm notoriously like super low on him. The best comparison I would say is Carson Palmer, because Derek Carr obviously without the arm strength, because Carson Palmer had a way better arm. But when you look, it's like Carson Palmer had the talent but couldn't get them over the hump ever. I mean, he couldn't get the Bengals, because they didn't want to play.
Couldn't get the Cardinals. Yeah.
Couldn't get the Cardinals. He couldn't get the Raiders.
Right. As bad as that went.
Yeah, that wasn't his fault. I mean, that was a train wreck. But no, and I kind of feel like Derek Carr is somebody that's going to end up with like the Eagles or somebody, and be that guy that continues to get starting jobs, but at that point he's going to be like a mercenary. He's going to be like a 1-year deal. Like, this is his last like long-term deal, I think. And
definitely,
in my opinion, a good fit for him would have been Kyle Shanahan's offense that doesn't demand, deep down the field, big time throws. And so if it wasn't for my guy Trey Lance, who I had as QB1, I would have said they made a mistake by not going out and getting Derek Carr, getting him and just having that stability over Jimmy G. Because to me, I think Derek Carr can win you a Super Bowl if he has the pieces to. I think him and, basically he's Jared Goff without the arm, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good comp. That's a good comp.
Because I think Jared Goff doesn't get enough credit for his arm strength either. But, I do think that had he gone to like the 49ers with Kyle Shanahan's offense and having guys, because the way they built out their roster, rather their, skill position players. I mean, Kittle can make anything happen after the catch, but you look at Deebo Samuel, it's like another running back. You look at Brandon Ayuk, thick, another running back, And then, of course, former running back, now wide receiver Jalen Hurd. So it's like,
That's
oh
my
my God.
guy. That's my
I know it
guy.
is. I know
I
it is.
rode him through the draft process. That was my guy, and he's been bit by that injury bug. I'm like, come
Oh,
on,
I
man. Let's
know.
see him. Let's see him healthy because
We were discussing that on the bleachers at the Senior Bowl. We're like, is Jalen Hurd going to get an opportunity? Like, man, I hope so. I think he could be really good. And I'm like, I do too. But
him and the Shanahan offense is a perfect match. Like the way he loves putting guys in positions to make plays after the catch, and I think a lot of people sleep in his ability after the catch because he's such a big dude. But if you go back and watch his tape as a running back for Tennessee, he punishes people, and I just would love to see that complimenting George Kittle for inside routes. Oh my goodness, yes, you can sign me. I've been devastated the last 2 preseasons. We're like, oh, he tore his ACL. Oh, he had a stress fracture in his back. I'm like, come on, man, like just let this guy through. And
oh man, I had him in Dynasty, so I was really upset because, like, I mean, look, it's you got to pick your poison because it's like I'm a Rams fan. Obviously, I don't want the 49ers to win the division or anything like that. I'm not going to root for them, but it's hard because I love Kittle personally. He was one of my first interviews, and I've been following him ever since. And then, of course, they went out and they got Trey Lance, who was my favorite quarterback and maybe my favorite running back prospect, who wasn't number 1 for me. He was number 3, Trey Sermon. I love Sermon. I love Sermon. I see so much Gurley in Sermon without the true knee, issue.
yeah,
I think the biggest thing with Sermon is that he doesn't have the long speed that Gurley had. But when you look at his explosive grade, his testing, this is the fastest guy in the first 25 yards of his run. And then after that, he doesn't maintain that speed down the field. But when he, the first 25 yards, he looks like Todd Gurley at Georgia with the St. Louis and LA Rams early on in his career. I mean, like, that's to me what I see. And so, when I hear he's getting first team reps and people are like shocked, I'm like, how are you shocked? I mean, Ohio State needed him. Can you imagine if Ohio State trotted out Master Teague the whole rest of the year? They're not getting as far as they did. They needed Sermon. They absolutely did.
Oh, absolutely. And he was a monster down the stretch.
Oh.
Not only that, and his tackle breaking ability in that offense, the outside zone runs. And if Lance is able to be the starter at any point, that RPO game is going to be dangerous.
I keep saying it. The trays.
And Mostert, I'm sorry, he had a good run there, but he's just not physically capable of staying healthy for a 17-game stretch now. So them insulating themselves, and don't sleep on Elijah Mitchell either.
Oh yeah,
the guy from Louisiana,
6th or 7th round.
Yeah, 6th round pick, and that dude, he's got the long speed. But whenever I went back and was watching tape of the Steelers selection, Kevin Dotson,
he's a beast, by the way.
Oh, I know, I love him. Him and Kendrick Green, I cannot wait to see pancake people up front.
I said this, and people called me crazy. Dotson is better than Robert Hunt. He always was.
Oh yeah.
Always was. I don't know what the Robert Hunt hype was. I'm not like hating on the Dolphins. Like, I hope he's good, but
he was just longer. He was just longer. That's the only reason. He played tackle more.
He looked physically imposing, but it's like, man, give me Dotson. I had a higher grade on him.
Yeah, and he was just a thug mentality. Like, they've been talking. Like, I'm just telling you right now. Like,
and I love Kendrick Green. Love him.
A lot of people, I'll just kind of go off my little foray here about the Steelers. I know we're kind of hitting and missing everything here. I'll get back quick. Let me hit your Derek Carr take. Derek Carr, you're saying the 49ers? I would have loved to seen him in Washington with McLaurin and Antonio Gibson in that offense, because all they need is like this much better quarterback play, and they're really legitimate.
It's going to be fun with Fitz, though, man.
He is. That's what I mean. Like, I don't want to knock him because you were saying like mercenary, and I immediately thought of like, he's like this. He's like the next generation's Fitzpatrick, so he can start for 20 different teams maybe instead of just the Raiders. But you're talking about Dotson and Trey Sermon. Like, this running back class, I think, really should bring out the aspect of knowing if you have an issue running the ball, you need to go out and take your running back. Don't worry about if it's in the first round. I'd be willing to take a running back in the first round, like my Steelers did, because you got that 5th-year option. I'd rather pay him that 5th-year option than going out and paying a guy on the open market. And after the crappy situation that Le'Veon Bell put us in and not taking the money, which he was a fool, you cannot you cannot, go throughout a career of a running back due to their longevity without targeting that second deal. So if you can get a guy on a 5th-year option and be like, oh, by the way, we can tack on another 2 years for a similar rate, why would you not take it? Because the market is terrible right now for running back. So to go down my wormhole here with the Steelers, you talked about Dotson and Kendrick Green. Everybody on mass media is saying how terrible the Steelers' offensive line is this year. I'll go out on the record and saying we'll be a top 10 offensive line unit probably by mid-season as a rushing unit and with their sacks given up. The only weak spot in the uncertainty that I see is left tackle, just because Okorafor hasn't played there since Western Michigan. Kendrick Green is going to be a day one starter. Kevin Dotson is an improvement over Matt Filer, who I think is one of the most overrated signings this year in free agency. He's a very poor offensive guard. I love the guy. He's a self-made player. He cannot play offensive guard in this league, and I know the Chargers paid him to be a high-caliber guard. He's a right tackle only. I don't understand why. It was one of the most mysterious things to come out of last year's season is his transition from right tackle to left guard was awful. That was one of the reasons why we were so terrible at running the ball.
Yeah.
And that offense, David DeCastro is the old guard there. Zach Banner is going to be a top 10 tackle, at least right tackle in this league. And you can take that to the bank. After seeing, I'll just give you a quick story. I went to training camp. It wasn't last year due to COVID, but the year before. I went specifically to go talk to him after practice, and he would not allow anybody to interview him. I actually got him like on the walk back up to St. Vincent's, and he said, listen, I'm not trying to be rude to anybody, but there's 5 veteran players right now that are in front of me. You go talk to them. He said, come back to me in 2 years, and I'll have some sound bites for you because I'll be one of the best tackles in the league. That's a guy that got cut after being a 4th-round pick, bounced from the Browns to the Steelers, and you see this guy in person, I wouldn't want to be an edge rusher going after him at 6'8", like 320 now. And his foot quickness has improved drastically. So it's going to be impressive, I think, the offensive line. And I really think with that running game, with the nastiness that Green brings to the table, it's going to be domination.
There were people that didn't like. All right, there were Rams fans that legitimately didn't want Kendrick Green because he wasn't Quinn Miners, which I was just like,
fan favorites, brother.
I was sitting there and I'm like, please don't pick Quinn Miners. Like, I honestly, it got to that point because I'm sitting there, I'm like, you don't want Kendrick Green? Are you kidding me? That athleticism. I mean, look, Quinn Miners is very athletic too. I mean, I think they tested about the same, to be honest with you. But he's also coming from D3. Like, to me, that's the thing I don't think is being talked about enough. I know guys have made that transition, and I'm all for the small school guy. I've interviewed so many people from small schools. I'm sure you have as well. Mm-hmm. But here's the fact, is that he wasn't getting the same coaching that an Illinois offensive center and guard, a guy that played both positions, was. I don't think he looked as confident, on film. I think pretty much what I saw out of Miners is this. Okay, Miners I think is going to be a good pro. But Miners also was going up against guys that were so inferior to him. It was like ridiculous. I mean, it was like really, really bad. I mean, we're talking, have you seen Chris Garrett's tape?
Yes.
I mean, I love Chris Garrett. I think he has a chance to be really good. He's got great guys around him in that Rams organization.
Throw that tape out the window.
Exactly. Because who is there?
It's basically, and I don't want to take this as a knock to you. It'd be like me blocking you in the open field.
No, okay? You're absolutely right.
And if anybody needs I'm 6'3", over 300 pounds, and I'm sure Jake is not that big. So I met Jake in person. That'd be like me meeting him in the second level and saying, okay, let's see what this highlight tape's going to look like. It's probably not going to be ending well. So, and anytime you get to a small school player, they better be making them plays against them type of players. I love Quinn Miners myself. He was one of my favorite interior offensive linemen in this class, but he also seen his draft stock go through the roof, and deservedly so. He had a great process. But would I invest a second round pick in him compared to where we got Green? No, I would take Kendrick Green, who's a similar athlete. You said he has the better coaching. Also, don't forget, he was a defensive tackle recruit to Illinois. So the nastiness is on the same level as Miners, only he did it in the Big Ten. And
exactly.
he has the versatility to play, not just play at the Senior Bowl as a center. No, he has Big Ten tape against quality NFL caliber players. So you're really taking that lottery ticket with Miners. And he's going to have that transition time that maybe you don't have with Kendrick Green. But I will say with Miners, he went to the absolute perfect spot because Mike Munchak
he's a beast.
Is an offensive line leprechaun. That's probably like the best way to describe him, because Chris Hubbard got paid big money by the Cleveland Browns because of Mike Munchak. Matt Filer got paid big money basically because of Mike Munchak, because he was
Garrett Bowles transition to becoming a top tackle. So, I mean, like seemingly overnight, it seemed like.
Yeah.
Andy
Levitre, if we go back to Tennessee.
Oh wow, that's a good one.
He was Tennessee's guy way back in the day. Got paid by the Falcons. You go through every stop that Mike Munchak's been there. He went to the perfect spot. He's not going to be forced into a week one position. If he does, it's because he's that good of an athlete and is a better upside than what Lloyd Cushenberry is at Denver, because he started the games last year after being a 3rd round pick. Miners can kind of bounce around at center and guard depending on where they need. You know, they have Dalton Reisner there. I forget who their other guard is off the top of my head, but he's been a starter for a few seasons.
They have what's his face from?
It's Glasgow. Graham Glasgow. They signed him. So I really project him more as that following year fit. Maybe we see Cushenberry take that next step, and Glasgow gets cut for the cap relief that they could use to go get their quarterback, Deshaun Watson.
Aaron Rodgers.
If I have to say Voldemort's name.
Who's Voldemort?
Aaron Rodgers.
What? How is Tom Brady not Voldemort?
Because I'm everything anti Aaron Rodgers. I do not like Aaron Rodgers whatsoever. Yeah, he's and I'll this might be, you know, the thing that makes your show get shut down, but he's the most overrated quarterback of this generation.
Wow, I think he's the GOAT.
The most overrated quarterback of this generation. How many Super Bowls have he won?
See, that's the thing, is that I look at, and I've had this conversation obviously many times with him and Tom Brady. And I think, you know, obviously you got to give Brady a ton of credit, right? Because you don't just win that much. You're not that consistent. But you talk about when we were just talking about this with Quinn Miners, lucking into a good situation. How about Tom Brady being with Bill Belichick, being with an organization that had only 2 times his entire career not a top 10 defense. Aaron Rodgers has only had 2 top 10 defenses. You saw in the playoffs, Tom Brady threw 3 interceptions and they still won. And you look at like Aaron Rodgers, and he threw one that arguably you could have said in that game that looked like PI to me against Devontae Adams, doesn't get called. And then it's like he threw 1 interception and they could not win that game. So, you know, I feel like, in my opinion, Aaron Rodgers does everything you want in a traditional quarterback in the modern era. A guy that's mobile, a guy that he has great wrist action. He's able to get such great velocity on the football. He's so good with just improvising. I mean, and that's the thing. I think he actually makes everybody around him a lot better. I mean, if you think about this, like, you know, I remember, I don't know if you were at the Senior Bowl when I was, but Alan Lazard was like, you know, I mean, he almost broke my legs. We'll just say that, because he caught a touchdown and then he slid and almost took me completely out. But Alan Lazard was like, a late round pick, maybe undrafted, was with Jacksonville, you know, bounced around. Now here he is. People are drafting him in like the 8th round in fantasy because he's with Rodgers, and Rodgers has made him relevant. You look at like Devin Funchess. This guy was like out of the league, and now people are like, oh, well, he is Rodgers, so I'm going to give him an opportunity. And like Rodgers was talking him up. And then, you know, like and honestly, with Adams, Aaron Rodgers had his best weapon at age 33. That's when that happened. And to me, Like Tom Brady has thrown to Randy Moss. Tom Brady has thrown to Gronkowski throughout the entire, pretty much almost his entire career, it seems like, because he's had Gronk for so long. Obviously, not really, but you get my point.
Right.
And then, and not just the Patriots, he goes to a team. He's not fooling me. When he went to Tampa, I knew what he was doing, because you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They had about 6 games in which that came down to the final score, 3 of which went in the overtime. Jameis Winston in that offense threw 33 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Everyone focuses on the interceptions, but Jameis, if you gave him another year, I think he would have led them to the playoffs. I'm not saying he would have won the Super Bowl with this team, and that's where Brady comes in, but Rodgers would have won a Super Bowl with this team, I think. I think Pat Mahomes. I mean, maybe Lamar Jackson, but I need to see him play better in the postseason. Maybe Josh Allen. But my point is that the Bucs were right there. And then you look at the Patriots, and it's like, well, the Patriots were great every year, and they only had 2 years in which they weren't a top 10 defense. So Rodgers, on one hand, Brady had Belichick, Brady had Arians. Rodgers' best coach just started with him, and that is Matt LaFleur. That's the best coach he's had. And that's at the tail end of his career. That's, to me, why I look at Aaron Rodgers. Plus, keep this in mind, I'm not really a proponent of believing that rings make the greatest quarterback ever. I don't think it's the greatest player ever, because I'd argue Dan Marino is a better quarterback, better at playing the quarterback position than Brady, and maybe even Rodgers. But he doesn't have a ring, so people are like, no, it's Montana, no doubt. No. And I'd say the same thing in other sports. I don't think Jordan is the GOAT, because if you're going by rings, then why aren't we going with Bill Russell? So I always feel like there's, like, what's his name? Robert Horry has 7 rings.
Yeah.
Like that's
he's a GOAT. He's the GOAT. Robert
Horry's he's the GOAT. He's more than Jordan. But like, to me, that's how I look at that. And then it was so irritating last year. Like, I'm trying to appreciate Brady's greatness, right? Like I'm trying to. But with the media, the way they just stifle it down your throat, and you're sitting there and you're like, but I could show you Aaron Rodgers' career and how he hasn't had that. And then he's considered, this and that. And what I would also say is how it's like they're over pursuing this idea that he made Belichick, which I think is ultimately entirely disrespectful to what Belichick has done in his career. On top of that, Belichick and what he did with last year's team was incredible job coaching. They went 7-9 with 10 COVID opt-outs. His quarterback got COVID in the middle of the season. His quarterback was Cam Newton, post MVP, post all of anything good about Cam Newton. He is not the same quarterback. No. And I mean, I just think, to me, he got the most he could out of that team. Would Brady have probably done better? Yeah. But I just think we're already using that season. Oh, well, Brady left and they didn't make the playoffs. I'm like, oh, come on now. Really?
Oh, there's
Brady
a lot more context to it. Can you imagine? There's a lot more context to it.
Exactly. Can you imagine if he went to that's the thing. If he went to the Bengals and he won a Super Bowl with them, I would have called him the GOAT. Yeah. I would have literally ended all debate, but he went to a team that was ready. He knew it. Everybody knew it. So
did Peyton.
So I would say that, and Peyton did the same thing.
So I think that's what Aaron Rodgers wants to do. Is he wants to be in that same class. But to me, there's something about Aaron Rodgers, and maybe it's just a grumpy Steeler fan at heart. But
okay, all right. I just realized the connection.
It's not just because of the Super Bowl, because I think a lot of the Super Bowl though was their defense carried him in that contest.
That's the weird thing, because Russell Wilson had the same thing happen to him. Great quarterback, but he did not win his Super Bowl. I mean, he did, but it was the defense.
You said the perfect example, though, is Dan Marino. In my opinion, if we're talking about just skill set wise from the quarterback position, Dan Marino is my GOAT. I always take Tom Brady out of the equation because, like you said, he's kind of the same category as Bill Russell. Yeah, he has the most rings. He had the greatest career with Bill Belichick. Although I will say this to you, whenever he was in New England, Bill Belichick, he had a lot of little things crop up with cheating and whatnot that went through, and his record outside of having Tom Brady is not good. It is below 500, not even counting last year. That's going for the stops at Giants and Cleveland. So
But remember,
I'm just saying the biggest thing. I'm not saying he's not
Brady
the greatest coach of all time.
Brady goes down, Matt Castle.
Right.
They don't make the playoffs, but they went 11-5. Is that their fault that they didn't make the playoffs at 11-5?
But it's just saying there's some stuff. I'm not saying neither of them don't deserve their kudos because they definitely do. But
yeah, they both do.
Aaron Rodgers to me is a product of people overvaluing certain traits in this category of this decade. The outside mobility, him throwing off platform, yes, he's one of the originators of that. But so does Matt Stafford. And I think Matt Stafford don't get enough credit for what he did in a situation with less. You said, now you made the comment here about Green Bay that he had his best target as Devontae Adams. I kind of would backpedal there. Go back and look at Jordy Nelson's career. Jordy Nelson was a standout number one receiver. Though. I don't know. Jordy Nelson in his prime.
I mean, we're talking about, like, is Adams the best receiver in the NFL right now? I don't know, but like, I think he's up there. I think he's in the
top 5. He's definitely top 5.
It's Nuke Hopkins. It's, I mean, Julio. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Calvin Ridley deserves to be up there after the year he had. I mean, if we're that'd be an amazing discussion because who the hell is number 1? I mean, all right, I'll say this: if I have to name one player that probably no one is thinking of, Keenan Allen.
Oh my, one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL.
Ridiculous.
And never gets any clout about it.
Literally no credit.
He is uncoverable from the slot. And for his size, he's 6'2". The guy's uncoverable from the slot. His route running, like Van Jefferson's upside is Keenan Allen.
It's funny, I compared Cooper Kupp to Keenan Allen coming out.
Cooper Kupp he's such a unicorn because he has good size. He's like a Wes Welker on like stretch him because he's, 6'1". So like his size is just freakiness for an outstanding slot receiver who can be also one on the outside because his route running. So that's what I mean. He's a true unicorn, and Cooper Kupp deserves every kudo he has. And that's one of the reasons too. In that offense, he's a perfect fit. But it's something personal with Aaron Rodgers. I just do not like him. And
I understand that though. Because I don't really like Tom Brady, but I try to keep that, you know what I mean? Like
when it comes to production, like at the core of it, okay, Big Ben, you're saying isn't as good a quarterback as him in his prime? You wouldn't take Big Ben's ability to go off platform, getting beat up with no offensive line, and take you to a Super Bowl?
I mean, I think Big Ben's underrated.
Very much so.
Because I think, well, one, the off the field stuff, I don't think he was ever given a chance after that to ever really do anything. Because, and keep this in mind, Big Ben, if he played, like, say, when Roman Gabriel played, he would have absolutely torched the league. Like, that's the thing that people don't understand is that, like, he was supposed to be in, like, the 60s, 70s, 80s era. Like, he would have dominated. But he's in the league, of course, like, the one, generation. He's with Peyton, he's with Breeze, he's with Mahomes now, Brady. Like, that's insane. Rodgers. So, to me, I do think, you look at a guy that has 2 Super Bowl rings. You look at a guy that has had to carry offenses. You look at a guy that as soon as he goes down, their season's seemingly over every single time, even when they have a capable backup. I mean, I thought, Devlin Hodges or Rudolph could do something, at least get him in the playoffs. And they couldn't get it done. So, like, to me, that speaks volumes to what Ben is to that team, what he means to that team. Plus, we got to give him kudos. He's the one that continues to take these pay cuts, just like Tom Brady was, by the way. I give him props for that because that's a team, that's a true leader. And that's my one knock on Rodgers, if anything. I know you have to get your money, but at the end of the day, what difference does it make? If you're trying to win a Super Bowl, why can't you take a small pay cut when you have all those endorsement deals and just let them go out and get a guy that can help you? And so, I love that Ben took that pay cut. It allowed the Steelers to bring back Juju Smith-Schuster, which a lot of people just don't talk about because, well, it doesn't fit a narrative. And on top of it, I think he's an extraordinary football IQ type of quarterback as well. I think he's very intelligent. You can tell. And on top of that, you look at the way, he's coaching. I mean, yeah, he's a guy that he's like a player coach in a sense, and he's coaching up Najee Harris. And I just feel really good about saying he's I wouldn't even say argue. I think he is a top 10 quarterback. I just don't think all time. I don't think he's given the credit, in that grand scheme of things. And, this is somebody that threw over 500 yards in his last game in the playoffs. It could have been his last game ever.
Mm-hmm.
He threw over 500 yards and everyone's saying he's done. I don't see how somebody who threw over 500 yards in a playoff game is done or even close to that, to be honest with you. To be honest, I mean, few of those interceptions, I mean, one of them was absolutely not his fault,
Right.
but I think it's just a matter of already hating Big Ben because of the off the field stuff. And look, I have all sorts of issues with off the field, stuff with some players. I mean, Greg Hardy, I don't think should have been allowed to play in the NFL straight
absolutely
up.
Not.
But with stuff with Ben Roethlisberger, that's like more, like we don't really know what happened, right? Like we really never got to the bottom of that. We don't know for sure. I'm not about to sit here and discredit him for his entire career and be biased against him because of that. And I think that's the problem, is whether people realize it or not, the people that hate on Ben Roethlisberger most of the time are biased because they already have that preconceived notion in their head from his off the field stuff. And again,
Right.
like I don't condone any of that, but we don't really know. Again, it's kind of up in the air.
But at the same time, nobody speaks about Aaron Rodgers and the company he keeps. Early on in his career, whatever you make your decisions about the people and the things you hear, but he was in the company of Ryan Braun, which Ryan Braun and him had business ventures together. Ryan Braun had a guy fired for his own mistakes, and then he gets caught again for steroid use. And
I could not stand that guy.
That's what I'm saying. And nobody brings up anything about Aaron Rodgers, and I have it on good authority from people I know in the league that said I would want, the comments that the president made of the Green Bay Packers said like just light years to me the other day, where they said, was it Thompson, who passed away, always described Aaron Rodgers as a unique individual. The last person that I heard described as a unique individual as a football player, he's now a Tampa Bay Buccaneer after going nutso off the field.
AB.
Exactly. So what does that say about your character whenever I know people in that locker room don't want to be around him? So
yeah,
at the same time, you're talking about a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, which, I'll be the first one to admit, I have family members that know him from a local establishment here that said, you don't want to be anywhere around this guy when he was a younger fella. Well, we were all young once. You make mistakes. By all accounts, in his second phase of his NFL career, he's grown a lot off the field, on the field. And I hope that happens for Aaron Rodgers. And that's where I'm kind of on the bias here about, we're talking about Tom Brady, who's been the ultimate teammate throughout his career, taking the pay cuts, taking the less money. And now everybody's jumping on his bandwagon saying Aaron Rodgers is the best player. Well, when I look at the best all-time GOAT, I'm taking everything into account, not just rings. I'm taking as, were you a good teammate? Were you willing to sacrifice for your teammates? Yeah, you might have the prettiest throwing motion in the last 10 years, but I would rather have a guy that's maybe this much less and take all the other stuff off the field, Russell Wilson and that sort of thing. So we could argue about this all. It's biasness, and I will give him his due. He has been a high-quality starter in the league. Would he be the guy I build a franchise around? Absolutely not. I probably wouldn't even be in my top 15, to be honest.
I really just want, sticking with quarterbacks here, I really just want Stafford to get the praise that he deserves. And I wish I could, this is what I'll say, okay? I wish I could watch football with every one of you people that are doubting. And I've been watching Stafford over here in New York. I've been a huge fan of him for like 6 years now. I've just been watching him constantly. And he does not get any help. And so, it's like for every Marvin Jones, crazy circus catch, that happens, there's about 5 plays that, no one that, like, if you don't go back and watch the all 22, you don't notice. But Stafford will throw, and actually Baldinger did a nice job of breaking this down. Stafford will throw this man open, and they're just not even looking for the football. I mean, it's like Stafford's just playing a different game. And so, when you look at like the NFL 100 list, and you have these players that went up against Stafford, and they're like, man, I don't know what the hell he's doing, but he's so far ahead of us, man. Like, it's so hard to stop him. I believe it. And so now, You pair him with Sean McVay. You give him all the weapons in the world. I think the Rams have one of the deepest groups, maybe even the deepest.
Oh, yeah.
And now he has a running game. 11 or 12 times, I forget the number. I think it's 11. He's had a 100-yard rusher in a game in his career. 11. Arguably his best running back is not
Adrian Peterson, an overage Adrian Peterson.
It's actually not. And I thought he actually played pretty well last year.
Yeah.
I liked his film, and he should absolutely get a contract somewhere.
Definitely.
It's actually Reggie Bush. He had 1,000 yards.
Oof.
And so to me, I mean, let's put it this way. Xavier Jones of the LA Rams, who's the third string running back, could probably go to 1,000 yards if you gave him enough carries. And he's got Henderson and Akers. So, I mean, for the first time ever, Stafford literally has everything. Like I said, the only thing they don't have is a star pass rusher off the edge to complement Aaron Donald. And Leonard Floyd's pretty dang good. So, I think now, Stafford not being down by 10, 14, 17, 24, watch as magically this guy stops throwing interceptions like people constantly bring up. Because, oh my God, he's not throwing it up to 3 defenders because he's just trying to make something happen in a 34-17 ball game.
And don't forget, the Rams have a pretty good offensive line. You know,
they do. Thank you for saying that. I've been saying it.
Go back through the last maybe how long has Stafford been in the league? 12 years now? 11, 12, when he was first round. Go back and name me how many Pro Bowler offensive linemen he had in front of him. I'll wait because I'm pretty sure it's in the single. I could probably count them on one hand. You know, the last few seasons, they had some decent linemen, but there's a reason why that guy is always playing with a broken rib or, you know, a messed up arm, a shoulder problem. He was literally running for his life because it was him and Calvin Johnson. So, in an offense that's based and predicated on the skill set and the skill players around him, it's a match made in heaven. And that deal you would do 100 times out of 100 with Goff. You know, as much as they came in together and they were working together and the successes they had, you've seen the cap that was on there. Like we talked about earlier, are you better off hitting 600 and making the playoffs every year? Or are you better off swinging for the fences and winning your 1 or 2 Super Bowls in the window you have? Give me the swing for the fences every time.
I agree, man. You know, I just, you look at what Stafford, and to be honest with you, Roy, I won't be surprised if we see a completely new Sean McVay-like offense. I wouldn't be surprised if we've actually never truly seen what Sean McVay had in mind for his offense, because I think they were getting to that point, and you saw 2018, you saw 2017, and what Todd Gurley could do. I'm curious that they use Akers in that way to complement everything. But I think they have, a guy they could designate as a pass catcher out of the backfield in Henderson, get him involved. He's not a true backup, and I keep trying to explain that to people. But I think, they're going to be more vertical. And another thing to kind of go, stick a flag in that cap of the Van Jefferson fan club. The guy can stretch the field. I know it doesn't fit the narrative because it's like, oh, well, the Rams needed a deep threat. But I kept saying, Van Jefferson, we were there. He ran the fastest zebra time of anybody. And Denzel Mims, by the way, ran a 4.3. And so did Devin Duvernay, and he ran faster than both of them. So, again, I don't really care how guys test, and we didn't even get to see him at the combine. I'm sure he would have run in the 4.3s if that was the case, but maybe not. And the thing is, I don't care, because what it showed us is that in pads and when it matters on the field, this guy plays faster. And so, to me, you saw that against the Cowboys early on. You saw that, against the Eagles. They stopped using him for whatever reason. I also think Jared Goff with his accuracy issues really held him back. But make no mistake, certain narratives out there, like Robert Woods can't go up and catch a 50-50 ball. That's going to be squashed this year when Stafford throws it up to anybody. And he goes up and because that's what he does. He doesn't care. Oh, Danny Amendola, well, you play for my team. You better go and get this ball. That's why I love Stafford, because he was literally throwing to Hunter Bryant, who is a UDFA tight end, who, yes, I think the draft community was way higher on than a UDFA, but that's not the point. The point is he was like their 4th string tight end, and against the Titans, he throws a deep seam buster to Hunter Bryant, the 4th string tight end, and he's just like, I trust you on 3rd and long, and he catches it. And that's the thing is Stafford's going to give everybody an opportunity.
Right.
Hell, he throws it up to Jesse James in double coverage, I believe, against the Saints, back shoulder throw. And it's just like the most perfect throw. And Jesse James holds on to it. They had, TJ Hawkinson. I mean, like, he will throw to anybody. It doesn't matter if you're a star. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Skoranek get an opportunity. If you put guys out there, Stafford is not looking at you. And this is a really good thing because, friend of mine, and he's actually the owner of Nightcast Media, Nick Hamilton, interviewed Stafford and asked him about, is there, a difference throwing from, guys like Kenny Golladay, 6'4", and Marvin Jones, 6'2", 6'3", as opposed to throwing a Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Van Jefferson, Deshaun Jackson. And he says, no, pretty much they're guys out there and, I expect them to make plays just like they expect me to make plays. And it's like, that's Stafford. Stafford's not materialistic. So it's honestly hilarious literally making this all full circle. It's hilarious to think he actually needs a Julio Jones when in reality, this dude will throw to Braxton Berrios and have a smile on his face doing.
Yep. And that's what I was kind of going to bring up. The point is we could bring this full circle. We started off talking about Julio Jones, and Matt Stafford may be your king of dark horse MVP candidates this year. Just for the fact of, what flavor ice cream do you want to get, this evening? Because we can kill you with the running game, two-headed monster. Okay. And I think McVay really learned his lesson by putting all his eggs in one basket in his running game with Gurley. He kind of learned his lesson. He's adjusted. He's kind of take this, I don't want to say a step back, but took a big picture approach and say, do I need to just invest in one running back? No. Do I need to just invest in one receiver? Nah. I got like 7 guys that I can do multiple different things. And I got 2 or 3 running backs that I can, beat you in a matchup if I need outside zone. I got a guy that can run between the tackles and beat you in that kind of way. I can go play action off of Cam Akers and hit you over the top with Deshaun Jackson or Jefferson. Oh, you need me to spread you out and beat you, in short intermediate routes like maybe the Patriots do? We can do that. We got Tutu Atwell and Jackson, Cooper Kupp. So literally, when you're looking at the full scheme of the Rams roster, what way can they not beat you in? Now with a quarterback with the IQ to win in all those different variety of ways. I have the confidence to throw back shoulder throws to a guy that's 5'8", maybe 170 pounds. Or I also have the confidence that I can throw Van Jefferson down the field. And I can also pre-adjust that, before the snap as well. So you have the genius of McVay pre-snap and then the experience and football intelligence of the veteran with all this litany of different skill sets there. So to me, it's a no-brainer. And they did the smart thing in not going after Julio Jones. So
I totally agree.
I love how we came full circle in this whole talk about Julio Jones.
That was perfect. I mean, I figured we would. Because I mean, I don't know, it just kind of worked out that way. And I wasn't planning it that way, but it did work out. But yeah, I think you look at this team and we'll wrap it up here, but I think you just look at this team and you're like, well, like what's going to kill them? I mean, really what's going to kill them are injuries, and that could kill anybody. But if you look, the Rams have done a nice job. I'm glad you mentioned it. Everyone's been telling me, why didn't they draft offensive linemen? Because they spent, 3rd round pick on Bobby Evans. They spent a 3rd round pick on Joseph Noteboom. They spent a 5th round pick on David Edwards. They've gone out and they've gotten these guys. Tremaine Ankrum, 2nd round pick on Rob Havenstein. They paid big time money. And then again on Andrew Whitworth. And they went out and they invested, it was a future 5th round pick, but they eventually had to give up that 5th round pick for Austin Corbett. So, they've really done a nice job building this offensive line. When you look, from left to right, you have Whitworth, you have Edwards, you have Corbett, you have Evans, and you have Havenstein, which is a top 10 offensive line in football. But when you look at the depth, and this is the thing where I try to explain to people, they don't have the greatest depth at center now that Blythe is gone. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the other positions, Noteboom's a backup. They have Ankrum, who they love. They're getting a guy back who actually, he is a leukemia survivor. So he had to opt out due to COVID because he didn't have COVID, but he was a high risk. Mm-hmm. And, and that is Chandler Brewer, a guy that McVay talks about. And McVay's mentioning you by name. You probably should pay attention.
As a extra draft pick this year, if I'm not mistaken, he said in the conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's a little interesting there. But, I just think they have all these guys there. You talk about getting Alaric Jackson, a guy they had a draftable grade on, and they get him in UDFA. They paid him more than anybody else in UDFA. So keep that in mind as well. And then this Percher guy, I mean, I'm not saying he's going to play this year, but he's interesting for the future, coming from, Italy. So, I mean, I like what they're doing with the offensive line. Really, it's injuries that could kill them. And then in this defense, because I don't think the offense is going to take a step back. Sean McVay's 37-0 when leading at halftime, and that was with Goff. And now you have Stafford, who just takes way better care of the football, and they're likely going to be leading at halftime more than they were with Jared Goff. So to me, you look at the defense, and if losing John Johnson is a huge issue in the back end of the secondary, that's a problem. But I don't think it will be. I think they're 4 deep there. Jordan Fuller emerged last year. He's not going to take a step back this year, I don't think. You have Terrell Burgess, who, man, he is so much better than, I swear the national media does not want to talk about him, but he's a 3rd-round pick. He was a 1-year starter at Utah. He was behind Blair, the 2nd-round pick from, Seattle. So he didn't get an opportunity, really. But when he played that final year, he did enough to stand out for the Rams. The USC game, you talk to scouts, they will tell you that USC game is where he stood out, and they were like, that's our guy, especially that interception he had, just showing just great ball skills and anticipation. This is somebody that emerged. He was finally getting an opportunity to play on the defense in prime time against the Bears, had 4 tackles early on, and then snapped his ankle. So he will be back. You look at Taylor Rapp, 2019, beautiful rookie season for Taylor Rapp. Underrated.
Taylor Rapp. Love Taylor Rapp coming out of Washington.
And then 2020, he had some moments, but in reality, they were so deep, and the emergence of Jordan Fuller really pushed him out. And I don't think he was expecting that. I don't think he was going into 2020 like, yeah, they're going to draft 2 safeties after I could have been defensive rookie of the year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think having him is huge. And then Nick Scott. You talk about a 7th-round guy they drafted entirely from Penn State to be a special teamer, and he's playing late in a Green Bay playoff game in the back end of the secondary, making plays. That's a guy to keep an eye on.
His athleticism is ridiculous. He's
really
ridiculous
good, man.
Scott. Yeah, I remember, and he was somebody that couldn't get on the field in Penn State just due to the amount of talent that was around him. But I'll go back to your comment. You were talking about the offensive line, and whenever I'm going through my, we talked about when you're building a team and kind of having your strategies on how to build a team. For me, when I'm looking at a big picture, you build to what the system is that you have. So McVay isn't just accustomed to one way of doing things with an offensive line. He expects you to both be able to play zone and man concepts. That's a hard thing to draft for. And they're able to, kind of mesh that kind of very easy with the body types they have. Yeah, they might be not the greatest fits, for the mock drafters out there, but if he's scheme specific and they're able to, do short trapping game as Bobby Evans, or maybe an Austin Corbett who, Cleveland really wanted him to play guard. Well, maybe he's a better center, and it's really just taking, the
Cleveland was so impatient with him.
Oh, he was. And I loved Corbett coming out. And for me, I build an offensive line like you do in baseball. When you're building a pitching staff, what do they always say? You're never going to get through a baseball season with 5 starters, right?
No. God, no.
That's the same way you should be building an offensive line in football. For me, I always try to take lessons from other sports and try to apply them and twist them into a football realm. And whenever you're looking at a offensive line, I'm not building for just 5 starters. I want 7, 8. I want my 8th guy to be almost as talented as my 5th guy because I know he's going to be starting at least 2 games in a season. If not, great. Then I have great depth. And maybe I can parlay that at the trade deadline for another piece somewhere else. Because as well as I do, there's always that injury as a left tackle, a starting center that goes out. And that can be just as devastating as your quarterback. Because if you're not keeping him upright or opening the rushing lanes for your running backs now that we're devaluing, what do you have? So really, you need to take that big picture approach. And it's kind of something just to keep in mind when you're talking about offensive line. Don't just look at your 5-man sets there. You talked about Noteboom. I loved him coming out of TCU. Corbett, quality player. These guys have the versatility, too, to not only play one position, but 2. And that's, your 6th, 7th, and 8th lineman, you really want to be able to have versatility. Tremaine Ankrum, he was a 2-time starter on a national champion with Clemson.
I love Ankrum, and I'm so glad. Like, I don't know if you knew this, you probably did, but he was getting the first team reps when Andrew Whitworth was on his, scheduled break. He has those veteran rest days.
Yep.
Ankrum, not Noteboom, not Evans, Tremaine Ankrum. And when you listen to scouts talk about him, they were expecting to go to Clemson. They hear, big Tremaine Ankrum. And they see he's 6'2", and they're like, wait.
Whoa, hold on a second.
He's playing over all those other.
Yeah. Which brings me to another point about scouting. People always knock people for, he's not the cookie cutter. Okay.
Yeah.
If I turn on the tape and he's dominating ACC opponents, guess what? He's probably going to be able to dominate at the next level. He might not be a starter of it, right away. He's going to probably have to prove himself to a coaching staff, but I guarantee if he can block guys at that level in a national championship type setting, he's probably going to be able to play somewhere on your offensive line. Maybe he won't play right tackle. Maybe he'll be a standout right guard because you're hung up on 6'2", almost 6'3". Big whoop. There was a guy that started for the Steelers as a 7th round pick, Kelvin Beachum.
Yeah.
Nobody said he could play any,
he's still in the league.
He started for multiple teams, the Jets, the Steelers. He was the right tackle for the Cardinals last year, and he played darn well. So when you're looking at players and just the way you're building a scheme, if I can leave any of your listeners type of things to think upon, don't go with the trend. Be your own person. Stand on your own platform. Be willing to put yourself out there and hang with it. If you're willing to put it out there and have thoughts about things, roll with it, because you just might be right. And there's too much groupthink sometimes, and you're afraid to go against the norm. It's okay to be different. It's okay to have your own thoughts. And that's one thing I always commend you on, Jake, is I always love seeing your feedback whenever you put out like your top 10 lists in draft time. And it's like, oh, where'd this guy come from? Like he had I can't remember the one this year. It was like he had a tight end. It was 3, and a lot of people had him as like an undrafted free agent. Like,
Kylan Granson.
Yes, they're like,
and then he ended up getting drafted. I was like, Ballard and I were thinking on the same way. That's how you know you're doing well. If Ballard agrees with you, man, I'll take it.
So it's like, just if you see it, put your name on it, stamp it. And I hate referencing stuff like I've done, but with Blitzlytics when I was with them, I had Max Crosby as a first rounder, in a first round mock draft.
Ooh, that's a king move.
To your Rams.
Oh.
And I think I was the only person in the media rounds that time that had him as a first round mock draft. And it just so happens that he's been one of the best players out of the entire class.
He's been better than the first round pick they had.
So
a lot better.
Be bold. If you see it, stand by it. And that's the one thing, as media scouts in this media industry, stand by that. And also don't be afraid to admit when you're wrong, because, hey, we're all flawed. We're all flawed. And even the best of the best are only hitting 2, 3 out of 7 or 8 picks that they get every year. It's almost like baseball. If you're hitting 300, you're in the Hall of Fame. If you're hitting 250 as a media scout, guess what? You're doing pretty good. And you just need to tweak and learn, and always, try to better yourself by learning from your mistakes. And it's something going forward that I love seeing the growth of some of these young guys in the industry, especially yourself, Jake. Like I commended you for your work on these videos you've been putting out and the previews. And it's awesome to see the industry taking off and where we're heading. I hope we're all full-time employees, whether it's on our own businesses or together in a different industry. It's big things in store.
No, I absolutely agree. You hit the nail on the head on that, man. I was going to say lastly on the Rams front, when people say that their offensive line is just, trash, my favorite word that people use. Like, it's just trash. Like, what do you mean it's trash?
It's cop out. Yeah. Explain to me what trash means.
Yeah. But, I can just leave everybody off. And I've said this before, so you guys probably already know. Dan G says Roy is wholesome. That's my guy, Dan Gleason. He's Thanks, awesome. Man. He's taken over as our fantasy guy on downtownrams.com. So we're excited
to see your work, brother.
Yes, Roy is the most wholesome person I think I've ever met. So I agree there. But no, what I was going to say is, the Rams actually underwent a interesting change at offensive line. So you talk about Mike Munchak earlier. they had a guy by the name of Aaron Cromer who I thought was just a total savant with the offensive line. And a guy that, he specialized in cross training everybody. So everybody could play every position, all that.
Yep.
But they go out and they get Kevin Carberry. What I find really interesting and what was a very obvious sign that I could be onto something when I said the Rams think that their offensive line is fine more than the media does is when he sat there with the Rams. I know he's not like the guy making these picks, but you see Walker Little go off the board. And you see Dahlman go off the board in the 4th round. And that, to me, those two guys from Stanford, I knew it. I was like, he literally came to this team, evaluated the offensive line, and said, you know what? We're good. And none of these guys were his. But he had 2 of his own in the draft that they could have gotten, and they didn't do that. And by all accounts, he wasn't, pounding the table for them. There was one guy they were absolutely pounding the table for, and that was Robert Rochelle in the Rams draft war room. And then another guy was Jacob Harris. But aside from that, like assistant coach, running backs coach, and now assistant head coach, Thomas Brown, he had the insight being with South Carolina. He really liked Ernest Jones. But I really think they were the highest on getting those 2 guys, Robert Rochelle and Jacob Harris. And it was unlike most Rams drafts, they went out and they got, really athletic talent, which you don't normally see. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. I thought you did a nice job of wrapping it up, but I had to throw it out there because it's just like, I feel like too many times we don't take that seriously, but that's a huge thing. I mean, this guy literally, he coached those 2 and they were like, yeah.
It's Bill O'Brien's days whenever he first came into the Texans and Hackenberg was there. Everybody's like, oh, he's going to take Hackenberg because that was his big-time recruit at Penn State. I think that says more about maybe the player and what they think their upside is than what you might want to say because they had how many years to work with him. Not saying he didn't like Dahlman and he didn't like Little, in that case, but at the same time, did he like him that much better than the guys that are already in there that he was able to see pre-draft?
Exactly.
So, that nugget. Keep the nugget in your head, so.
I'm going to be dropping that on every podcast, like, during the season when people are like, oh my God, the Rams offensive line's good. What? Like, it's almost like Roy and
we'll be in
Jenkins
the same club. We'll be in the same club. Your Rams will have a top 10 and my Steelers will have a top 10 here.
There we go.
Season, which everybody's been hating on at this time. But
and I can't wait to watch Kendrick Green just bowl people over. But that's gonna be all for us. So appreciate you guys. Roy, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really do appreciate it. Really excited to get our guide out there, and everyone else to check that out. Anything else you got to plug, man?
Yeah, hey, I'll just throw it out there. Check out all the great work not only Jake does, the guys over at the NFL Draft Bible I'm now part of. They really welcome me with open arms. They really embraced me here. They got a lot of great stuff coming out. They already dropped a mock draft for next year, as early as the process it is. Go check out allaccessfootball.com. That's where you're going to be able to purchase the PDF version that we're rolling out here of the Prospect Encyclopedia. This is last year's edition, the first one. The number 2 edition is going to be featuring your man Jake here for the Rams. Go out and check it out. Over 700 players. This year we're including some international players, so maybe your Rams guy might even be in there. A little scouting report in there, getting familiarized with the IPP players, maybe some other guys down the road. We're going to be throwing that in there. Just really thank you so much, Jake, for having me on here. Thank you for being a part of the encyclopedia. Can't wait to see what the next chapters are for us going forward. But if anytime you need a guest, I'd be willing to jump on here and talk football any time of the day with you, brother. So, and as always, I like to end my appearances with stay humble and be a blessing.
Absolutely, Roy. Hey, thank you so much, man. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Go follow him. Be sure at Preacher Boy Roy and go follow NFL Draft Bible. They're putting out great content as well. Appreciate you, Roy. Appreciate you guys. We're heading out. Later, guys.